You know that kind of small town that still has paper flyers on telephone poles? Where every front porch has the same wind chime. Where nobody ever seems to leave. That's Briar Glen. And I only ended up there because my cousin was getting married 2 towns over, and I was early. Too early. So I took the long road. Stopped for gas. Saw a hand-painted sign that said, "Community Hunt, April 19th, all welcome, begins at dusk." Easter was over. It was the 23rd. I figured they were just late. Or maybe local tradition was different out here. I like weird places. So I parked. Walked around. And something felt off. The houses were all too quiet. But I saw people. Peeking out through blinds. Sitting still on porches. Watching without smiling. And eggs. Hundreds of them. Hung from tree branches. Stacked in old wooden crates. Balanced on church steps like offerings. Some were plastic. Some looked carved. And some looked too perfect. As if they'd been polished from the inside. A woman handed me a basket. No words. She just nodded. I asked, "What's this for?" She didn't answer. But the man beside her did. He leaned in, breath like wet paper. They don't like when you skip your turn. And that's when I saw the poster behind them. Faded. Torn at the edges. Taped to a brick wall. Dozens of names. Handwritten. A list. And some had lines through them. One name was mine. I should have left. I know that now. But something about the air in Briar Glen, it held you. Not heavy like fog. More like tension. Like the moment before a song ends, when you don't know if there's one more note. I kept the basket. Not because I wanted to play. But because everyone was watching. They didn't follow me. Not exactly. But the moment I stepped onto the edge of the field behind the church, I could feel them, lining the sidewalks, clustered on porch steps, standing in the doorways of shops that had been closed for decades. They wanted me to look. So I did. The field was filled with eggs. Most were obvious. Big plastic things in pastel shades, some already cracked open with candy half melted in the sun. But scattered between them, just a few, were others. Smaller. Duller. No shine. And the way they sat in the grass didn't look right. They weren't placed. They'd grown there. I bent to pick one up. It was light. Lighter than plastic should be. Warm in my hand. Smooth, but with a kind of texture beneath the surface. Like a thin skin wrapped around something not dead enough. I didn't open it. Not yet. I walked farther into the field. 3 kids were ahead of me, barefoot, dressed too formally for a game. They weren't laughing. Just walking, picking eggs one by one, placing them in their baskets with the reverence of pallbearers. One of them turned. A boy. He looked at me and said, "Only the filled ones matter." "What's in them?" I asked. He smiled. "That depends." "On what?" His eyes flicked to my basket. "On who you are." Then he dropped an egg at my feet. It cracked. Not like plastic. Not like porcelain. It cracked like bone. Inside was a single black feather, wet at the base. The boy walked on. And then the bell rang. One long note. The town bell tower, above the church. Every head turned toward it. Even mine. When I looked back down, the egg was gone. And my basket had one more egg in it than before. A red one. With a faint heartbeat. I didn't hear footsteps. But I knew someone was behind me. I stood there in the middle of that wide, overgrown field, the grass whispering at my calves, the sun bleeding sideways across the hills, and I knew that if I turned around, something would be too close. So I didn't. Instead, I stared at the red egg in my basket. It pulsed. Not violently. Not rhythmically. Just, aware. A twitch. A tiny shift of pressure against the wicker. Like it was testing the air around it. Testing me. The bell kept ringing. Once every few seconds. Not rushed. Not panicked. A rhythm. Like counting something down. That's when the man in the tan coat appeared beside me. He didn't walk up. He just was. I wouldn't try to leave, he said. Calm, casual, like we were discussing weather. I didn't find mine, I replied. He looked down at my basket. Then back up. His expression didn't change. You did, he said. That one's yours. How do you know? He smiled, just enough to show one molar missing. It moved. He reached out like he might touch it, then pulled back. They don't like being handled twice. I stepped away. The bell stopped. The silence that followed felt like a door slamming. He looked toward the hills. They'll come now. Who? But he was already walking. Toward the church. Toward the others. I hadn't noticed them gathering. But they were there. Townsfolk. Lined in rows. Facing the field. Silent. Some still holding empty baskets. Others cradling their eggs like fragile animals. And there was no wind. No birds. No sound at all, except for the faint, wet tick, tick, tick coming from the thing in my basket. I started back toward the road. I figured, leave the egg. Leave the town. But the egg grew heavier with every step. By the time I reached the church fence, I could barely lift the basket. And when I set it down, the red egg was glowing faintly. From within. A low, pink-orange light like flesh lit from behind. I took a breath. Then I picked it up. It was hot. And then, it whispered. Not in words. In memory. I saw myself as a child. Running through this same field. Holding a basket. The same red egg inside. And a woman, smiling, kind, someone I don't remember, saying. You always forget. I didn't want to hold it anymore. The heat coming from the egg was rising, not scalding, not painful, but deep. Like it was warming something inside me. A marrow heat. Ancient. Familiar in a way that made me hate it. I looked around for someplace to leave it. A bench. A windowsill. A basket beside someone else's porch. But every time I tried to place it down, my hand wouldn't let go. The muscles in my fingers locked. Like the egg had settled into me. Like it knew where it belonged. I made it back to the gas station, thinking I could just leave town. Get in my car. Drive west until the fields turn to desert. Lose it in the long road silence. But when I opened my door, the seat beside me was full of grass. Fresh. Still dewy. As if someone had scooped up a patch from the field and laid it out with care. In the middle of it, another egg. Identical. Still red. Still faintly glowing. I didn't put it there. But it beat in time with the one in my hand. I placed mine beside it. Same shape. Same pulse. But as soon as I backed away, only one remained. I tried to step back inside. The door slammed shut on its own. Locked. Back in town, the people were gathering again. No fanfare. No announcement. Just a shift in the air. The man in the tan coat stood on the church steps, holding nothing. But his hands were stained. Dark. Dripping. Sticky. He smiled when he saw me. "You still think you're the visitor," he said. "You're not." I didn't speak. He stepped down. The crowd made space. And then he pointed. Not at me. At the egg. "Drop it," he said. So I did. Right there in the middle of the square. I opened my hand and let it fall. It didn't bounce. It didn't crack. It landed with a thud. And then something behind me screamed. Not a person. Not animal. A sound like fabric tearing under pressure. Like lungs filling with something that wasn't air. I turned. But there was nothing. Just my shadow. Only, it wasn't shaped like me anymore. It was kneeling. Cradling something in its arms. Something that moved. And from beneath it, I heard the whisper again. "You can't give away what already knows your name." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the wooden floor of room 4 at the old motel by the edge of town, the only place with a vacancy, and even that felt like a lie. The key was already in the door. The bed was already turned down. And the light above the dresser was already on, humming faintly, like it had been waiting for years. The egg was still with me. No matter where I went, it followed. I'd left it in the square. I'd seen it fall. I'd heard something, someone, scream. But it was on the nightstand now. No longer glowing. Just sitting there. Silent. And split. Not cracked, not shattered. Opened. As if from the outside. Like something had peeled it apart, slowly, reverently. Inside, was nothing. No feather. No tooth. No message. Just a faint oily sheen across the inside surface. And an impression, faint and wrong, as if something small and wet had once rested there. I leaned in closer. And that's when I noticed it. Not in the egg. In the mirror. The mirror across from the bed showed the room exactly as it was, every detail sharp. But my reflection was holding the egg. Both hands. Clutching it to my chest. But I wasn't. I backed away. The reflection didn't move. It just stared. Mouth slightly open. Then. It smiled. I left the room. Didn't take anything. Didn't lock the door. Just walked, barefoot, down the empty streets of Briar Glen until I reached the church again. The bell tower had no bell anymore. Just a long, dark shape inside. Still. Waiting. Below it, at the church's front steps, were the townspeople. They didn't speak. Didn't move. Only watched. And I realized. None of them were holding eggs. Only I was. Mine. Theirs were gone. One by one, they turned and walked into the church. Vanishing into the dark. The door stayed open. And I could hear it. From deep within. Not music. Not voices. But a wet, rhythmic sound. Like hundreds of things breathing in unison. The egg in my hand pulsed again. For the last time. And then stopped. The streets of Briar Glen don't loop. That's what made it worse. I know this town isn't big, 4 blocks wide, maybe 5 deep, but when I walked down Main and turned left at the antique store, I expected to find the church. Instead, I found the gas station. The one where I first arrived. The one where my car had been. Only now it was empty. No cars. No pumps. No people. Just a humming fluorescent light over the door and a shadow moving inside that didn't match the light's rhythm. I turned to walk back. And that's when I saw him. Me. Standing across the street. Same coat. Same face. Same dirt on the knees of the jeans I'd fallen in. He didn't look at me. He looked past me. toward the road leading out of town. Then he turned, and walked that way. Calm. Unbothered. Like someone who wasn't carrying anything anymore. I tried to follow. But the closer I got, the harder it became to move. The air thickened. Not fog, resistance. Like walking through clear water. And the sound returned. That slow, wet breathing. It wasn't behind me anymore. It was below. I dropped to my knees and pressed my hand to the pavement. It pulsed. Once. Twice. Then a voice, deep, but not loud, rose through the cracks. We only let one version go. I backed away. My doppelganger didn't stop walking. Didn't turn around. Just vanished down the highway bend. And I was left behind. With the egg. Still open. Still empty. Still warm. I walked back toward the motel, not because I wanted to, but because it was the only place left. The people were gone. The church was silent. The bell tower now completely dark. But the eggs. They were still everywhere. Hanging in trees. Balanced on fence posts. One on every step, every sill, every windowsill and mailbox. All of them open. All of them empty. And all of them facing me. I made it to room 4 just before dusk. The light inside flickered once, then steadied. On the bed was a note. Same handwriting as the first one. Same yellowed paper. Your place has been held. The others have gone forward. You may try again. This time, don't forget. I turned it over. On the back, in faint red ink. You left last year, too. But something followed you home. There are things I remember now that I shouldn't. Not dreams. Memories. But they don't belong to this spring. They belong to another version of me. One who stood in the same field last year. One who opened the egg. Held what was inside. And tried to forget. It started with flashes. A reflection in the motel mirror, facing the wrong direction. The hum of the church bell, but in reverse, like time pulling backward. Then I saw it. In the closet. My coat. The one I arrived in. Hanging perfectly. Dry. Dustless. And tucked inside the pocket. A Polaroid. Faded. But I could still make it out. Me. Kneeling in the grass. Holding an egg that was already open. Blood on my hands. And behind me. A shape. Tall. Bent. Watching. I dropped the photo. There was a knock at the door. 3 short raps. Then silence. I didn't open it. Not right away. But when I finally did. There was no one there. Just a basket. Inside, a single black feather and a folded paper. The egg is not a test. It's a key. You failed to turn it last time. I don't remember last time. But my hands do. They ache in patterns that match the cracks on the egg's shell. They twitch when I walk past mirrors. They hold on to things too tightly, even when I'm not trying. I went to the church one last time. The doors opened for me. No sound. Just air, thick with memory. Inside, the pews were filled with figures. Not people. Not ghosts. Shells. Each with an open egg resting in their laps. Each with a face that looked almost like someone I used to know. I stepped forward. The altar was empty, except for a chair. And in the chair, sitting upright with its hands folded, was me. Eyes closed. Mouth smiling. Chest moving, barely. And in its lap, my egg. Closed again. Whole. Waiting. I don't know how long I stood there. Just, watching myself breathe. The version of me on that chair was still. Perfectly still, except for the chest rising and falling with a kind of mechanical rhythm, like a thing mimicking breath rather than needing it. It wasn't sleep. It was storage. A place they kept me when I forgot. I stepped closer. The room didn't fight me anymore. There were no whispers. No pressure in my skull. Only presence. And the egg in that version's lap? It wasn't red now. It was white. Bone white. Smooth. Almost shining. Unbroken. Unopened. A reset. Waiting for a choice. I reached out and touched it. It felt like skin. Warm, soft, and slightly pulsing. And when I touched it, the room changed. Not around me. Inside me. I saw the field again. The first time. I saw a dozen versions of myself. Each dressed differently. Each walking the same path. Each picking up a different egg. And in every path, I failed. Dropped it. Rejected it. Gave it away. And each time, something followed me back. Smaller. Angrier. Hungrier. This time, I didn't flinch. I lifted the egg from my sleeping self's lap. He didn't wake. He didn't have to. Because now, I understood. I walked out of the church and down the hill, past the people-shaped shells and empty windows, through the soft grass, where the eggs no longer glowed. The town didn't fight me. It never did. Because this wasn't about escape. It was about permission. When I reached the edge of town, I opened the egg. No feather. No tooth. No message. Only a mirror. Small. Cracked. I held it up and looked inside. And for the first time, I saw all of them. Every version of me that had ever walked this path. Eyes wide. Mouths closed. Waiting for one of us to make it all the way through. Waiting for someone to finish the hunt. I left Briar Glen at dusk. The road curved behind me like it always does. But this time, the egg stayed open. And when I reached my car, I was still holding it. No heartbeat. No heat. Just a reflection. And this time, it looked like mine.